Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to AI for Founders. Today, I'm talking to Peter Holcomb. He is a seasoned IT security leader with nearly 2 decades of technology experience, building and maturing security programs for startups and global corporate enterprises in technology and healthcare industries. He's a Denver guy. I'm a Denver guy. We're going to go deep into AI governance. Happy to have you here, Peter. Today's episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books your podcast interviews. Specifically, Kitcaster works with funded startup founders, entrepreneurs with exits, and C-suite executives to book them on the world's top podcasts. Now, we know as founders and CEOs, it's kind of on us to lead from the front. We're talking about founder-led marketing, and there is no easier or less friction way to get into kind of thought leadership pieces and founder-led marketing than podcast guest interviews, and Kitcaster makes it easy. Check out kitcaster.com today and apply. Buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going so good. All right. So we're going to talk all about your company. We're going to talk a lot about AI governance, but I'd like to lead into these things with just a quick question. What are you really excited about in AI right now? What tools are you using? What kind of landscape are you looking at? What's firing you up with AI right now?
What's firing me up about AI is the way we can become more productive as individuals and as businesses and companies. A lot of businesses want to use AI to their advantage and make their employees more productive. But there's a double-edged sword to that, because how do you do all of that securely? How do you do it safely so you don't inadvertently leak sensitive information, have any data security issues, model security issues, privacy concerns? All of that stuff is going to have to be accounted for when it comes to using AI responsibly. And so what I'm really keen on finding out within the next, by the end of this decade, is how are companies building responsible AI systems that can benefit them and the businesses that they serve.
Yeah. And before you kind of build something positive, maybe you could talk a little bit about ways that people are using AI out of AI governance, that they're doing it wrong. What's a bad way to use AI for founders right now?
One of the biggest ones is algorithmic bias, where there's inherent biases from the trained data, which can lead to unfair or discriminatory outcomes. So it is often done that way because the model is only trained on a subset of data and is not accounting for the entire demographic that it could be serviced for, right? So that is going to be a certain challenge that companies are going to have to overcome. This should come as a no-brainer, but there's data breaches concerns, right? So if the AI is trained but doesn't have the access controls in place, it could inadvertently leak sensitive information, or data could be exfiltrated from the model itself, leading to privacy concerns, where it can be used and exploited for mass surveillance, which would obviously raise ethical and legal issues and concerns there. So a lot of regulatory and compliance initiatives are going on today to account for this stuff. You have frameworks like the NIST AI RMF, the ISO 42001. You have also the EU AI Act. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of frameworks that are helping with this specific issue.
You know, and all this stuff is kind of right on the cutting edge. So everyone's trying to figure out how they can use it. And there's so many different applications, whether it's kind of creating your own GPTs, creating your own tools, or just the kind of brass tacks way of using the LLMs to just enhance your performance. We'll say as a writing tool, or a calculator or a search bar. I mean, it's kind of taking over. So, as far as use case goes, what should we be concerned about? You got major players in the space now. You have OpenAI with ChatGPT. You've got Gemini, of course. You've got Perplexity. So as kind of like a business owner, and I am just basically gossiping with it as much as possible. Kind of what I wanted to know is all the ones and zeros, nuts and bolts of the company, but I also want to give a contextual analysis of relationships. I want to put absolutely everything through there so I can create like a council that is like totally trained on me and as much nuance as I could possibly give it. That being said, how secure are these kind of major players as far as the information I'm inputting? Is there a share on the outside? And from your perspective, is there information I should not be feeding it?
Yeah, I mean, once you put that data into the model or into the chatbot, so to speak, you're relinquishing control of where that data goes because the model providers will essentially inherit that data, and they're going to use that data to train their models. And that's why you see new versions coming out with GPT or Anthropic Claude or Hugging Face or Olam or any one of the flavors, right? Um,
DeepSeek.
yeah, DeepSeek. That, oh goodness. Hopefully, not using that one. But yeah, there's a lot of concerns there, and the biggest concern is don't put in sensitive information. So this is social security cards, credit card informations, all that kind of stuff that's very sensitive to your personal life shouldn't really be popped in there, unless you have an AI system or a model that you're using and it's enclaved and it's sort of running locally or otherwise, right? Really well protected, then use it in that manner. But a lot of times what you're seeing now is these AI systems are being used in tandem with RAG-based applications. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation, whereby it goes and collects or supplements the initial query from the initial query to get more context, as you mentioned earlier, to give that output more effectiveness or more accuracy. So when you do that, you're calling other databases or other APIs or other data systems to pull in that data. Well, there's inherent access control vulnerabilities that could happen there, because if the APIs are not protected and they're not safeguarded from an access control perspective, that's where the leakage could happen, or the data security concerns could come into play. So I would just be very cautious about what you're putting in there. I think for writing, for putting out outlines or blogging or article creation, that's fine. But if it's more sensitive than that, I'd be very cautious about what you're entering into there. And it really just goes around PII, personal identifiable information, and then PHI, which is personal healthcare information. The healthcare industry is starting to use a lot of this as well, but there are a lot of sensitive details that can be gleaned from in a healthcare setting, especially related to a patient record. That information should not be put into an LLM because there's just extremely sensitive information that could do damage if it gets into the wrong hands.
Well, GPT has inferred that it's a walled garden, that like your data's safe, it's encrypted, they're not sharing it, they're not doing any of that. Do you trust them?
I'm gonna say only a little bit. I mean, they're AI is a speed. It's a race to the top right now in terms of who can create the best models, who can create the best tools to interact with it. So I'm going to trust them lightly. I don't know that I trust them fully, because this is why you have all these AI security companies that are coming behind them and creating red team services or guardrails to make sure that the AIs don't hallucinate, to make sure they have guardrails to make sure that the AI only stays within its confined system, or within the model context, and doesn't expand beyond that, right? So I would be very cautious about how much trust you put into them to be able to bake in the inherent security controls that need to be effective.
Let's expand upon that. Let's go full science fiction and doomsday scenario. So there's this idea that hypothetically we could create a time machine, where you basically create a ripple in space-time from a point. Let's say right now we turn it on, and as long as it's open, you'll be able to send information back to the time that you turned it on. So in a sense, you would know that it works because the second you turned it on, you'd be getting information from the future. And it might be 5 minutes from then, or it might be 5 years, it might be 50 years. It could be some kind of like space demon that evolves out of there. Who knows? But the idea is that like from when you start, let's say with an LLM, it's starting to gather this data on you, and it doesn't end with no sight or no end in sight. So these major players, if we're assuming that OpenAI and Google and Claude are going to be kind of front runners, let's just go into like kind of a use case that like, let's say if it began a year ago and I've been putting all of my medical information in there. I've been putting all my financial information in there. I've been getting advice from these agents on how I should do it. Now, should I be concerned as far as time machine goes that in 5, 10 years, it's going to go back and let's say United Healthcare will be like, wow, well, actually Ryan disclosed to me some medical conditions in 2025 and so my rates are adjusted and things like that. I mean, that's probably like, you know, it's the elimination of absolutely all of your privacy that's ever existed. Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, I'm a huge privacy proponent, but the reality is that privacy really isn't taken seriously in the United States. So much so, for example, we don't have a unified privacy law or policy in the United States. We have separate state laws, individualized state laws, and nothing is actually congruent or standardized, if you will, right? Whereas if you look at the EU, they have the EU Privacy Act, which is the GDPR, General Data Privacy Regulation, right? And so it covers the entire European Union. We need to do something similar to make sure that we can actually uphold all of the privacy in a standardized manner within the United States. But we're not going to do that because we're not privacy type people here. And quite frankly, we've sort of relinquished that battle with privacy, and we've given that up because we want instant gratification. We want things to work now, and we want to be able to plug and play as much as we can, right? And so that's going to be basically giving up a lot of the privacy rights that we would have normally.
The opposition to the GDPR might be like, well, hey, man, the pee's already in the pool. It's like you can say that you're not going to snoop, but like, what are you going to do? What's the recourse if like, I'm in England and they're going to say like, oh no, you've been disclosing all this information on our website. And so you're not going to see it, but we're selling that data to XYZ provider. I mean, so, or is it that this kind of privacy really should be the battlefield of where we start to, our intention is to slow down AI a little bit from creating a time machine monster that will doom us all, which I'm not inferring it is, but it is probably alarming at the pace that things tend to go. We're kind of in this exponential race right now. So
100%.
would privacy be the place that, hey, actually, this is how we can temper this a little bit? To date, the only thing that I've seen that's slowed it down a little bit is the music industry. Because if you don't want to tangle with a lawyer, but you definitely don't want to tangle with a lawyer that's doing IP for the music industry because those guys have sharpened swords,
Yeah.
So, is kind of like creative IP a place that we can go to say like, hey, you trained all of this stuff on, Star Wars universe, like you kind of ripped me off, and like use the lawyers to go there, or maybe a place here, which is like privacy. We need to iron out privacy to make sure that like, as this progresses, we can at least have some semblance of privacy moving forward.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Copyright, infringements, digital signatures to make sure that we can uphold the data integrity of how that data was initially sourced and then utilized to train that model, right? If you think about OpenAI and how they were created, they just siphoned all the data from the internet, right? And then they
Yep.
created OpenAI. Now, DeepSeek came along and did the same technique to OpenAI, where they basically did a technique called distillation, where they basically just scraped all the data from them and then created DeepSeek in a much cheaper fashion, released it as an open source model, and now they're off for the races, right? And so that privacy concern has completely been neglected, and then you have this sort of AI race war that we're in right now, right? So to your point, I think that would be a great way to go is to be more privacy focused and conscious about this. Have those respective digital signatures or copyright laws in place to make sure that we're understanding how the data was sourced, who it's sourced from, is it done in a reasonably ethical manner, right? And those things are accounted for. But in a very apocalyptic manner, I feel like we're not going to do that. You know what I mean? Because the race, the cat is out of the bag, and
Yeah.
and people are rushing to get their tools out to the market. People are rushing to be the model provider winners. And the businesses want to use this. They're eager to use this, but they also are understanding and wanting to understand what are the security and privacy implications of using my own proprietary data that I've had for maybe a century. If you look at those companies like Walmart or Costco or the bigger ones, right? They've been around forever, so they're sitting on a treasure trove of data that they want to pump into these LLMs, but they're very apprehensive about doing that.
Yeah, Oracle. What happens when Oracle gets an LLM? Dude, they're just gonna stack the information on top of the information. It's funny too, and it also starts to like really tie into like what you're talking about bias that's baked in, about hallucinations, and to this point of the speed we're using it, there's kind of anecdotal maybe evidence that the Trump administration is using GPT to create its like tariff policy. So like how do you safeguard against something that, is so confidently wrong, about, even if you just say, let's be generous, 1% of things it's totally dead wrong about, but 99% it's right. Safeguarding against that becomes more and more difficult, especially as kind of like you're describing, DeepSeek just scrapes all OpenAI, and OpenAI scraped the entire internet, and then something scrapes DeepSeek, and now we have kind of an old school
pattern, right?
Making a copy of a copy of a copy, which degrades the fidelity of the original.
Oh man, that's so well said. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the fidelity is just going to get extremely bad, and quite frankly, that the product overall is going to get extremely bad because it's just garbage in, garbage out, right?
Right.
And then that's a really terrible paradigm to live by. I would say back to your inference point, though, with regard to like inference security, one of the things you really want to do is sanitize inputs both ways, right? The inputs that are going in and then the outputs that are coming back. So you want to process all the prompts prior to inference and then post-process all the model outputs to mitigate any of the prompt injection attacks or undesirable behaviors that could come about from that initial sort of inference standpoint. You also want to make sure that you're limiting functionality and explicitly defining and restricting the functions to the tools the AI agent can access with the principle of least privilege. This is really where the IAM, Identity Access Management, comes into play, because access is going to be really crucial for when these AI systems reach out to other supplementary systems to call that information, to give it additional context, to give you a more reputable or accurate answer. And then you certainly want to monitor API usage, right? You want to implement rate limiting, have an observability platform that's like an application performance monitoring platform to be able to detect anomalous usage patterns that may indicate the abuse of how the system is being manipulated. So from an inference security perspective, that might be some of the best steps you could take to make sure that inputs are being and outputs are being sanitized appropriately.
This sounds like a product opportunity.
There are some companies that are doing this already, actually. I'm actually a consultant for one of them, a vCISO consultant, and they're building some of these inherent guardrails into their product. They're also doing the red team exercise, right? So you could come in, bring in a model. It could be any flavor of model. They'll do the actual red teaming exercise to understand the efficacy of that model, not only at the model layer itself, but at the LLM layer as well, to show you the inherent vulnerabilities that might reside there, which is why I go back to saying that the model providers themselves, while they've tested this stuff in-house, they're not going, full gung-ho on all of this to make sure that it's extremely effective, right? They're going to leave it to other security companies that are going to come behind them to tack on some of the bells and whistles that the companies are going to have to deploy by acquiring these model providers, these security companies to implement on top of the models that they deploy in their environment. So there are a lot of companies that are actually working on this right now, and I've demoed a lot of them. You have some companies that are only focusing on the model stuff. You have other companies that are doing guardrails specifically for the LLMs on the application layer, and then you have other companies that are focusing more on the training and awareness piece of it and understanding how do we want to make sure our people and our employees are using this effectively. What are the best practices that we want to employ as a company so that they know how to use it correctly.
You bet. And that kind of highlights too, kind of like one of the splinters of what AI is doing, because you have, OpenAI made the chat interface the way that most people understand AI, which was brilliant in its simplicity. But we're
Yeah.
also talking a lot about agents, which is saying deploying multiple LLMs to prompt engineering to marry these three APIs to bring in these two workflows, and then it's outputting, getting more complex, more human oriented tasks. Right now, probably limited by GPU, and to really build an agent's probably going to run you $20,000 a month. So it's like, how much is that happening? But that's coming. That's the probably next 12 to 24 months when we start to have these more advanced agents. And to your point, there's probably a product opportunity that works into that workflow of the actual DNA of the agent itself to put guardrails on it, to make sure that AI governance and compliance are being monitored, or at least reported on, to find some way of, quantifying bias and hallucinations in some capacity. I mean, where do you see governing fitting into the creation of these AI agents?
Yeah. I think it's going to be deeply paramount. The agents, agentic AI is essentially what it's known as. They're just basically chatbots working with chatbots, right? So you have AI systems that are going to be interacting with each other through some human intervention. Then you're going to have what's called fully autonomous agentic AI. And that means that you're going to feed it an instruction and it's going to go do everything, right? It will go and do the research. It will go do the analysis. It will go do the writing of maybe a security rule, and it will become sort of your blocker and tackler, if you will, that a security analyst might play in that role. And it will effectively do all of that for you through autonomy. And that's where I think it's really going to lead to, like you mentioned, in the next 12 to 24 months, how it stays lockstep and barrel with all of the new AI rules and governance frameworks. Man, I don't know how they're going to be able to keep up with all of that, because that's going to be the deepest challenge. Is all these rules are coming out, but the systems are being built and iterated on a daily basis, if not weekly basis, right? And so all these new bells and whistles are coming out for these agentic systems. It's going to be a challenge to keep up with that from a compliance standpoint, and then from a guardrails and security controls standpoint as well.
Well, good thing we got companies like Optimo IT to help us out in that quest. Now, this is your company. I want to talk about this too, because this kind of ties into the doomsday scenarios, which, forgive me, but it's my favorite thing to talk about, all the stuff that keeps me up at night about AI, the scary parts. I mean, I use it all the time. So excited building products with it all the time. But the scary things, and one of the scary things is the job displacement that's going to be caused by AI broadly. Some report that if we are fully able to capitalize on the technology we have right now, you might lose 20% of the workforce. Of course, that's going to take plenty of time to roll out. But the other side of that is that AI is actually going to enable a lot more new jobs and new tools, new technology. And maybe you can speak to that, because your company has been doing IT for a long time. And I'd love to hear how this kind of transition to AI and maybe the popularity of these kind of services and products is starting to change.
Yeah. We were really focused on virtual CISO services, so virtual Chief Information Security Officer services, initially, really coming in, helping these companies build a governance program that's built around successful frameworks that have been deployed with bigger businesses. So as I mentioned earlier, NIST AI RMF, ISO 42001, EU AI Act, all the control frameworks and control languages there. And then you're building the guardrails, the actual technical controls into those things as well. And so now we're pivoting into an AI governance practice as well, right? So we have the security officer services, advisory services essentially, and then now we're doing the AI governance stuff where we come in and we do the risk assessment first, understand what you're using, what models you're using, what inherent vulnerabilities reside there, build sort of a red team exercise around that so that we can understand in real time what are the actual security implications that might reside from deploying, said AI system. And then we do the defend aspect of it, which is building the guardrails around it to make sure that we can protect whatever AI systems you're looking to develop with the proprietary data that you want to make meaningful sense of or informed decisions off of, right? So it's sort of a holistic approach where we do a risk assessment to understand and analyze what's readily being used, do the red teaming exercise to understand the efficacy of what's being used, and then do the blue team sort of work where we're going and protecting and providing guardrails and defense mechanisms to make sure that businesses can use their AI systems effectively without being compromised.
Yeah. Just to get a sense of demand and kind of how things are shifting, you've been doing this for 20 plus years,
Yep.
but for all intents and purposes, AI has been really kind of cracking for about 5 years, give or take. So what's demand look like now? Like as far as like your service offerings around AI governance, how does that compare with your other services, or is it kind of baked into the whole thing now?
It's sort of baked in, but that's a really good question. vCISO is more needed right now because, as you mentioned about job displacement, I do feel like we're in a job scarcity sort of turning point right now. Businesses are apprehensive about hiring, and it just doesn't mean the individual contributors. It's executives alike, and so this is why the fractional services manner works so well because businesses can get expertise at a fraction of a cost, and they're willing to pay for that. What they are also wanting is how do we make sure that we can do this AI stuff? So we've sort of coupled it together, and we can offer it as one white glove turnkey service, so that they can not only get the security expertise, but they can also get the AI governance and AI security expertise that they need to be able to use these modern tools in an effective manner that suits them best. We are seeing that it's starting to grow, but it's not immediate, right? So it's being very methodically thought about in terms of how they want to either buy the services or buy the security tools that are going to protect them. And they're really understanding what is the efficacy of what I'm buying to make sure that they're getting the return on investment, and it's going to be a viable investment they're going to use long term. So the services standpoint, it's coming from more of an advisory standpoint, but the actual AI governance and security, they definitely want that. It's just they're making sure that they're doing their due diligence with all the other players in the market to make sure they're buying the right tool for their journey with this whole AI push that's coming along.
How do you do your due diligence on which tool? Because there are 150 tools popping up every single day. And for some reason, I got to click on all of them. Is there is there something that jumps out at a tool that you feel is makes it more trustworthy?
Yeah. There's a platform called Hackerverse that I've used where we go and test the efficacy of the actual tool in real time. So we sort of set up a red team, blue team exercise where we will go and take the tool and we will have red teamers come in and do the hacking exercise on gaining access to the underlying model or popping the LLM through prompt injections or jailbreak attacks, what have you, right? And they'll test the efficacy of it. Beyond that, I would like to make sure I would have a scoring criteria on how well is this company funded, who are the backers of the company, who's the team behind the company that's being that's building this stuff, what kind of clout and traction do they have in the market, and then really putting it to a bake-off between all the other vendors that you have. And I know that that's a challenge because POCs take a lot of time to complete, but having an arena like Hackerverse and then testing it with a tool like Test Savant, are those the two partners that I currently work with, is very effective to be able to understand the efficacy of these tools, and the potential gotchas or the security concerns that underlie them.
Are we talking about testsavant.ai
Yeah,
and hackerverse.ai?
that's right. Yep. Those are
Cool.
the two companies that I currently consult for, and it's actually a great marriage because Hackerverse is really the arena for where these tools can get tested, and then Test Savant is really the arena where, Test Savant is the tool, is the guardrail tool and the red teaming tool that can be used to test the efficacy of these other AI systems that a business might want to employ into their environment.
That's huge, man. That's a huge recommendation because if it's kind of battle tested from hackers, and I couldn't tell that you were a hacker because you're not wearing a ski mask. So
Or a
I
hoodie,
thought,
right? I mean, no hoodie.
I thought you were supposed to have a ski mask and a hoodie to be a hacker, but no,
Oh
I
man.
like how important is that? Because again, like we're coming to a point of like zero barrier of entry. I could just go to anybody's website and say like, hey, Lovable, craft me a website that looks exactly like this, that does X, Y, Z. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
2 minutes, boom, 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 their output, you know? So it's really
And,
interesting.
and to your point, Ryan, I mean, I'm more even scared about the autonomous agentic AI hacking that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Without the human in the loop that's going to have to even do any intervention. It's just going to be the autonomy of the AI system up to its own vices, and it's going to do its own hacking and analysis and reconnaissance and everything else that goes along with it, right? So there's going to be a lot of concern for that as well. Where I see this going, Ryan, is bots fighting bots, right? On the
Yeah.
defensive side and offensive side, it's bots against bots at that point.
So then what's the human element that's needed? Obviously, you don't want fully atomic agents going against each other. Do you think our AI agents are just going to tap us and be like, "Hey, Peter, what do you think about this in your gut? What's your gut tell you about this?"
I think you're going to always need the human in the loop, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so that's where the human in the loop is going to come into play.
Well, Peter's line got cut off. Apparently, he lost power. So we're going to have to come back for part 2 and see if we can hit the same trigger words that got AI to knock the power out so we would end the conversation. We can't be stopped. We can't be stopped. I'm just kidding. I'm not mocking our robot overlords. In fact, I love them. So anyway, tune back in. We'll bring part 2 back next week. So let's talk about podcasts for a second. You're listening to one, which is awesome, by the way. Thank you so much. But have you ever thought about being a guest on a podcast? Like seriously, imagine sharing your story and your expertise and your business all on shows where your ideal customers are already listening. Kitcaster connects founders and entrepreneurs, professionals with podcasts that actually make sense for their brand. No pitching, no guessing. You just have great conversations on great shows. And the best part, Kitcaster handles everything. You just show up and bring your A game, Kitcaster does the rest. This is hands down one of the easiest ways to grow your personal brand and just create a wellspring of content for short video, for blog posts, for speaking engagements, for whatever. So if you've been thinking, yeah, I really need to step up my content game, go to kitcaster.com and apply today. Now back to the show.